grow. There's no way we can evolve. And when we think about it, we tend to base our life a lot of times on assumptions, but think about our clients who come to us and we are making assumptions that we understand things they're telling us when we really may not. We may be assuming because it's similar to something in ourselves, but that doesn't mean it's true. And when you think about it, really, beliefs are assumptions that we have internalized. So think about that for a moment, because it's really important to understand that if you believe something, right, it's not necessarily a fact. It's something you believe. So it's an assumption that you've now internalized. So let's look at, since we're talking about creating awareness, exactly what is a shift. So if you just go by the dictionary, right, it's just a change in position, a change in place. That's a shift. Something has moved. But in coaching, it is actually a change in perspective about a firmly held idea. And the important part is that may or may not be true for the client. Right? So it's not necessarily their truth. And that's where we come in to be better listeners. So what we're really trying to do is give our clients a new viewpoint based on the same circumstances. Those circumstances don't change. But we're trying to give them a new viewpoint, a new way of seeing things. And often, there's this misconception. And the misconception is that it has to come in a huge aha moment, right? But I can tell you that very often, the shift or changes come in waves. That's how a client described it to me. I thought it was a perfect word. It can come in waves, which means it can come throughout the conversation. It's not just necessarily one big thing. So I'm going to give you an example. And it comes very often when we're reflecting something. So there was a client who was talking about her situation of trying to decide something. I says, you know, it sounds a little bit like there's this push and pull going on. And she just stopped. I didn't even get to my question. She's, oh my God, that's exactly what it feels like. And that already began some awareness. And another client was telling me how she had grown up and they told her never to go to college and she wasn't smart enough and all those kinds of things. And by the way, whenever I'm talking about a client or ever giving you an example, it's either from my upcoming book or it's with absolute permission from the client, or I've changed the circumstances slightly. But everything is, legit. So I had this client, and she felt that, she just wasn't all that smart, even though she wound up graduating with a double major. But what I said to her, I said, it's so interesting listening to that, because I've always thought of you as so brilliant. And then I was just, like to me, it was just an offhand comment, literally. And I have to tell you, to this day, and this was probably close to 20 years ago, she still reminds me of how that altered her entire life. And it was just a comment that I made. So the point I'm trying to make here is that these shifts come a lot of times during the conversation, and we may not be even realizing that it could be happening. Okay, so I am, I want to say opposed to, let's say, jargon. And to me, jargon is when you have to explain something to the client as to what you mean. And to me, every coaching conversation, if it's really masterful, it just uses our everyday language. It just uses words that we would say. I always say, would you say that to your friend over lunch, right? To me, it just should be natural conversation. So if you think about it, the word belief and limiting ideas, we think about that, that's coaching talk. We know what it means, and for this talk, it's fine to call them beliefs. But when you think about it with a client, I find actually I avoid that word. And so what I like to think of it, it's the idea or the thought the client thinks is true that is keeping them stuck. It's the idea or the thought that they think is true. And so I even use those words with the client, idea or thought. So it sounds like you have this idea that. It sounds like you have this thought that. Rather than you have a belief. To me, it winds up almost actually sounding derogatory in some ways. Like you have this belief, and I'm going to prove to you that it's not really the truth. So there's something, that's off for me in that. That's just my thing. Okay. So now what I want to show you is the objective that we are striving for when we are coaching. So let's think of this as our world. It's everything we know, everything we believe, everything we think, every experience we've had. And then there's the rest of the world, and that is everything that we don't already know. All the things that are out there that we're not aware of. And the goal in coaching is to open up people's worlds so that they're now exposed to things they didn't already know. And so when we are working with clients and we want them to shift their thinking, what we really want them to do, I always say, and I'm going to show you the slide, but I'm not going to leave it on because it can make you nuts, because it moves. And the last thing, anyway. So what I always say is we want clients to have like a spin of their head so that they can't even remember how they were thinking before they started. That's really the goal. So I came up with this. Like, whoa! All right. But what happens instead of that total shift, don't stare at it because it can make you nuts. But what happens instead of that total shift sometimes is what I'm going to call strategy. So how many people in this room, you hear somebody has a strategy and you think, that is so cool, that's great, strategies are wonderful? I mean, be honest. Okay. And how many people think, well, maybe strategies aren't so good? Anybody? Who hasn't taken my class? Okay. So what's really important about strategies is the intention behind them. Because we have strategies that are really temporary ways of coping. So let's look at that first picture. And the person says, I am never going to eat chocolate cake again. What are the chances that that's going to hold for that person's entire life? Right? We all know, probably zero. Never going to touch the French fries, whatever it is, right? And what happens in coaching is that people say they're going to use their willpower. They may not use that word, but from now on I'm going to look. But that means that you have not helped that person see their situation differently. Another example, the sticky note, or I'm going to write it on my calendar. So how many times have you put a sticky note up to remind you of something on a daily basis? You hear a client say, I'm going to put that on my mirror, I'm going to put that on my desk. And what happens after a few weeks? You don't even see it anymore, right? It's just become part of the furniture. Okay, so, and the last one, the people pleaser. So what happens, these are just examples. There are tons of strategies. And I didn't want to spend a lot of time, but I wanted to give you the idea. So a people pleaser, I had this person who, she was taking people to church on Sundays, and she bought a new van because she felt this will be so much help, this will really help these people and be such a nice way to transport them. And then she came to me and she said, I am so angry and so upset and I'm really disappointed because nobody appreciates that I bought this van to bring them to church. Well, what is that really all about? It was her strategy to get people to like her, to accept her, to include her, whatever her thing was. The point I'm trying to make is that so much of coaching goes into the strategy versus changing the thinking. So let me give you a couple of examples. So I had a woman and she said she was having trouble feeling okay about how much she was charging her customers. And she said, but you know what, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to journal. I'm going to set up my schedule the night before. I'm going to really put things, in a particular way so I will know and be more prepared. And I said, that sounds great, and those are great strategies. But that does not even remotely address what you're charging people and how you're feeling about that. So, and then and then it just said, what do you think? And she said, you're right, because of course it doesn't. Another example, just to give you an idea of how deep coaching can go. I know some of you may have even been on this call. Again, I have permission. It was somebody who said, my whole house is like a museum. It's so pristine, it's perfect, everything in place, except for my basement. And what does everybody want to do with that? Okay, well, let's work on cleaning up your basement. What do you need to do that, right? Where are the piles? Those are strategies. What we went for was, what is making the basement different from the rest of the house, right? So I said, my question was, what would it mean for you if your basement was totally cleaned up? And you're never going to believe. The response was, oh my gosh, it's actually my legacy, and my kids are going to be in that room with all my stuff, and it just means I'm closer to